So in the last lecture, you learned how change detection works. In this lecture, I'm going to show you change detection in action. So I've got this project that you can download from this lecture if you want to code along with me. Once you download, then simply do an npm install and then ng-serve. Now when you browse localhost port 4200, this is what you see. So we have a list of movies with 3 movie objects. Let's take a look at the structure of this application. So in app.component, you can see I have declared an array of 3 movie objects. And in app template, you render the movies component and pass our movies object as the input to this component. And similarly, if you look at the movies template, you see we are using the movie component and use ng4 to iterate over the movies object, which is the input into this component. And then we get each movie and pass it as the input to our movie component. So pretty simple. So what we have in this application is very similar to the tree I showed you in the last lecture, except that here we don't have a navigation bar. Now to demonstrate when change detection happens, I'm going to go in app component, and on the top I'm going to import doCheck interface and then implement it here. So implement doCheck. That's one of the component lifecycle hooks. And then here we add ng doCheck method. And here we add console.log app component dash doCheck. Now I'm going to repeat this in my other components as well. So I'm going to copy this method here. Now let's go to movies component, paste it here, and change the log message. So movies component. And of course, we need to add implement doCheck here and import it on the top. So doCheck. And one last time in the movie component. So I'm going to import doCheck on the top, add implements doCheck here, and simply paste our method. And finally change the label to movie component doCheck. So we have implemented this interface at 3 levels: app component, movies component, and movie component. Now I'm going to go in the template for app component and add a button here. So click me in app component. And for the handler, let's use onClick. Now let's go to app component and add this onClick method here. Now here I'm not going to make any changes to our model, just a simple handler with no code. Let's go back to the browser and see what happens. So I'm going to open up the console. And first I'm going to clear all the messages here. Now let's see what happens when we click this button here. We get 5 entries in the console. First we get app component doCheck, then movies component doCheck, and then 3 movie components doCheck. So this shows that whenever a button is clicked, whether there is a change in our application state or not, Angular traverses the tree of our change detectors starting from the top and asks the change detector for each component if there is a change in that component or not. Now this button we clicked is in the template for app component. It doesn't matter where this button is, whether it's an app component or movies component or movie component. Whenever we click a button, whether there is a change in the application state or not, Angular runs its change detection, which goes from the top to bottom of our component tree. Now similarly, if we go to the template for app component, let's replace this button with an input. And here I'm just going to use ng model and bind this to, let's say, title property. It doesn't really matter. As long as we have an input that has ng model directive applied to it, let's see what happens. So save. Back here, I'm going to clear the console. I put the focus in this text box, and now I click outside. So the onBlur event is triggered, and look, again, in the console, we have 3 entries. So once again, we have not changed the application state, just the trigger of unblur runs the change detection. And this is a very simple Angular app. In a complex real-world application, change detection is happening pretty frequently, and you don't see that. Now, if you have complex views and a lot of data, this change detection is going to have a cost, even though our change detectors are optimized for performance. Because as I explained in the last lecture, each change detector is generated based on the component it's going to target. So we have highly optimized change detectors that can perform several thousand checks in just a few milliseconds. But I'm going to show you in this section how we can even optimize this further. Now, in the last lecture, you learned when change detection happens. So far, you have seen two examples which are about DOM events. Let me show you one more example before we finish this lecture. So once again, in app component, I'm going to add a constructor here and call setTimeout method. A very simple callback, does nothing, and I'm going to run this after 3 seconds. Save. Back here, let's clear the console. Okay, again, we got 5 messages in the console. And the same thing happens whenever you make an AJAX request. Next, I'm going to talk about change detection strategies, which determine when a change happens in a component.